I'm Christie Bilbrey. After working in a Senate press office, the White House, and corporate, I started my own business and realized none of those experiences taught me how to market myself. Thankfully, I discovered how brand storytelling and strategy could help me easily connect with others, promote my services, and grow my brand. I created the Business That Story Built podcast to help business leaders strengthen the stories we tell ourselves and the stories we tell others. Ready to take your mindset and messaging to the next level? Let's get started. On today's episode, you get to hear a really interesting perspective from PR and marketing from an insider on Wall Street and as a seed investor. So this isn't something that we typically get to have on my podcast. So I'm really excited to bring you into this really cool perspective of business. And if you find today's content helpful, I would love to have you subscribe, rate, and review the Business That Story Built on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Patricia Lizarraga is the managing partner of Hypatia Capital, an asset manager focused on investing in women in leadership since 2007, and the issuer of the Hypatia Women CEO ETF, which is on the New York Stock Exchange as WCEO, investing in American public companies with women CEOs for performance, diversification, and impact. Ms. Lizarraga has over 25 years of merchant banking experience. In addition, Ms. Lizarraga founded Grupo del Ande, a leading agribusiness firm in Peru, and is a founding and former investment committee member of Sigma SAFI, a leading asset manager in Peru. Prior to founding Hypatia Capital, she was a managing director of Credit Agricole Securities New York Mergers and Acquisition Group. She started her merchant banking career at DLJ. She serves as an independent board member of Credit Corp Limited, which is on the New York Stock Exchange, BAP, the largest financial services conglomerate in Peru, where she is chair of the Audit Committee and former chair of the Corporate Governance Committee. She also serves on the board of directors of Banco de Crédito del Peru, the largest bank in Peru. Ms. Lizarraga is a former independent trustee of the John Hancock Complex of Funds. She has served as the president of the Privatization Committee of the Toll Roads of Peru. Ms. Lizarraga is a trustee for the Museum of Art of Lima. She received her Bachelor of Arts degree cum laude from Yale University and her MBA from Harvard Business School. Thank you so much for joining today, Patricia. I'm really excited to have you on.
Thank you, Christy. So excited to be here.
Yeah, can you just start by sharing a little bit about your journey? What really piqued your interest in pursuing a career on Wall Street?
Sure. And I've been thinking about this question because I get it. And I really have never answered where I think it really started. I usually start my story with David Swensen being my first finance professor. But I think, why did I take David Swensen's class? And it was actually my college roommates. I have to admit, I look back and just the way their life worked, they were already managing part of their money. They were responsible for it when we were in college, their investment portfolios. And I came from growing up in Peru in a military dictatorship, and we don't think we had a stock market back then. And so this was completely new to me. And they convinced me to take this class called, I don't remember the name of the class, but its jokey name was Stocks for Jocks. And that set me on a path that changed my life.
That's incredible. I have a similar story with going into politics from just kind of a random, I think I'll take this. This would be fun. So you always felt like this type of career was totally within reach. Wall Street didn't seem intimidating to pursue.
It didn't, because actually all the banks would come and recruit on campus. And so I figured, if they were on campus recruiting, that I was one of the people they were trying to recruit. And so I think that I felt that at least getting an initial job wouldn't be impossible.
So who do you feel like has influenced you the most? It's interesting. You come from Peru. I would love to hear more about like that influence and what you've gone on to do, and just Yeah, who do you feel like has kind of shaped you and your path the most? Who or what, I guess?
Yeah, I really think that who you are is such a combination of the different experiences that you have. And because I spent my childhood in Peru, came to the United States for university, and have been back and forth, I think that what's been really interesting to me is to always have been between these two cultures, which are very, very different, and being able to see how people look at the same questions from two very different ways and realize that there's not just the two ways of the two groups at those two countries that I'm part of. Each, there's just so many different ways of looking at a question. And I think that's made me the person who I am.
Can you share? You had told me on our last call about in 2015, you had this aha moment that again kind of changed the trajectory of where you were going to be headed. And it really made you become very interested in investing in women led businesses. So, can you share a little bit about what happened there?
Sure. So actually, it starts back earlier than that. We launched Hypatia in 2007, and the idea was more kind of the DLJ model, advisory and principal investing. And therefore, we were looking at private companies. We were getting involved with CEO level women to try to put transactions together. And at the same time, we became aware of early stage investing in women entrepreneurs. For example, Golden Seeds, I think was one of the first companies that started doing that, and I invested in their funds. So we were all about investing in the private markets. And that was right when investing in women started becoming a thing. But by 2015, there were products all across the asset classes. So we held an event. It was called Investing in Women in Leadership Summit. And what we did is we invited speakers who were leaders of firms that were investing in women in leadership from early stage, from startups, all the way to hedge funds, right? Passing by venture capital. We had Anya Dugal from Female Founders Fund. We had Angela Sun, who had just launched Bloomberg's Women in Diversity Index. We had people from State Street's ETF. And we looked across a spectrum, and I realized, you know what? If you aren't an accredited investor, there is actually no way for you to invest in women in leadership. The product doesn't exist. But at the same time, all the data and our experiences as women are telling us that women outperform. So there is not a product in the market that allows women to invest in outperforming women that's available to all women. And that seemed like something that was worthwhile creating. And that set us off in the path to where we launched the WCO ETF last year.
And you had mentioned to me that you've been able to see that women-led companies tend to outperform some of their male counterparts. So what are some ways that you have seen women really drive innovation and growth and better businesses?
So the WCO ETF invests in 140 companies, right? We invest in 140 publicly traded companies in the United States, all of which have a market cap of $500 million or more. We are invested in every sector. We are a diversified investment. So when we look at all of these companies, innovation means something completely different in the oil and gas industry than it does in consumer products or in veterinary products. But what we see over and over again is women having a less linear path in their careers than men. And therefore, to make it to the top as CEO, by definition, you've done things a little bit differently. Just by definition of who you are, right? If 90% plus of the people that reach the level that you've reached are men who tend to have a more linear career, by definition, women have had to think of different ways to get better results, to get ahead, to overcome obstacles. So we really look at it person by person. It might look different, company by company. It might look different, but the ability to be nonlinear, I think, is what we've observed.
Okay, interesting. So can you share a little bit more about kind of when you decided that it's time to make a move and leave Wall Street and really make this your sole focus? A lot of listeners are founders or making pivots in their career. I mean, how difficult was that? Was it seamless? What did that look like?
So I'll answer that question. I just want to take a step back because I think my answer didn't have a specific woman that I looked to, but in terms of how we see women lead. But I'm just going to give one example. If you look at Occidental Petroleum, that is one of the most controversial investments we make because lots of women who invest in women are also very vested in climate change. And so they're, wait a second, but you have Occidental Petroleum in your portfolio. We're like, yes, but look at what Vicky Holub is doing. First of all, Vicky Holub is backed by Warren Buffett. But second, look at what a leader she is in the decarbonization movement. And that's what I mean by women, being indifferent, doing things differently. But addressing your question of the moment that I left Wall Street, or at least a big corporation on Wall Street, to branch out on my own, the way I saw it was the company that I want to work for does not exist. Right? In 2004, when I started thinking about it, there were 8 women in the Fortune 500. Today, there's 50. There were 8, literally 8. And all of a sudden, one day I had a female CEO client, right? I was an investment banker, so my clients were often CEOs. And I just thought she was so amazing. Gilbert Bosch, she was this French woman who started in the secretarial field and made it to COO Jimmy Goldsmith and bought companies, and she'd been the CEO of Adidas. And I just thought, wow, I really want more clients like her, more female clients. It was my Jerry Maguire, right? Less clients, having more female clients. And I really went out and I said, how could I do that? And the only way to do that was starting. And the question was, would I be able to make enough money to have that company? And mind you, the way that the investment banking business really works, as long as you have 1 or 2 clients that you're working for, you're going to do okay because that's just the nature of that industry. It's more consulting like. And so I thought I had at least 2 clients, and I said, I'm going to go for it. And I did. But the idea was to build the company that I wanted to work for, because it didn't exist.
And so what would you say has been really helpful in terms of strategies, tactics that you've used to help build awareness of the WCEO ETF?
Sure. So one of the reasons we thought we could be successful in launching the WCEO ETF is because there are now so many platforms to reach, millions of people. We had been building a very strong network of CEO level women since 2007. We have an amazing, email list. But we realized the way LinkedIn and Twitter, X, and Instagram, the way they allow you to have a message that will be amplified, we thought went very well with what we were trying to do, which was to democratize access to investing in women by women. So I think that when we realized 5 or 6 years ago that social media was becoming a way to reach people you didn't know, and you didn't need these huge marketing budgets to be on TV, that made something, that's kind of where we saw a space for us.
Okay, so really taking advantage of different types of social media platforms to reach women. And were there certain demographics you were really going after?
So to build the assets of our firm, we definitely need to go after ultra high net worth people because they can make big allocations. And you think about your portfolio, In a portfolio, regardless of whether you're conservative or aggressive, you're probably not going to have more than 5 or 6% in your portfolio. Let's say 5% to give everyone between 1 and 5% of your portfolio in what are small cap allocations, right? So if you think about a portfolio needs to be diversified. One way to diversify your stocks or your equities is to buy some large cap, but most of it large cap, and some small cap. And the WCO ETF is a small cap. So because we really only want to be 1 to 5% of somebody's portfolio, in order to get to scale, we need to go for the larger portfolios. But we care as much about the investor who can invest $30 million as the investor who can invest $30. I mean, one share of WCO ETF is a little bit over $30. For $30, every woman in America can own a piece of every company led by a woman in America with $32. And that's, so everybody is actually a potential client. And trading ETFs is free. So if you go on to SoFi and open up an investment account and put in $40 and buy one share of ETF, basically you own a piece of Citi, you own a piece of UPS, you own a piece of Oracle, you own a piece of Williams-Sonoma, you own all these companies led by women that you know and love. You can be invested in.
Back to kind of on the marketing side. So what have you learned in using these different platforms over the years? And things change all the time. But what have you learned that's really helped you with your outreach and marketing to these target groups of women investors? Were there any surprises or anything that you learned along the way that might be able to help others?
So the biggest lesson so far, and we're still in it, is eyeballs do not mean action, right? How do you get somebody who agrees with you to actually do something, right? People, of course, if you say, would you rather be invested in women CEOs than in men CEOs? Given the women outperform, most people say, well, I'd like a little bit of both. But how do you get them to actually go into their SoFi or Schwab account and make the change of their portfolio, or put, a little bit extra in this year, or make that allocation to their IRA or Roth IRA? How do you get people to act? I think I'm going to take a behavioral finance class. That's what I care about the most. Like, how do we get people to act on their values? It's easy, but why aren't more people doing it? That's what I think. That's what my recommendation to entrepreneurs would be. Like, yes, people might agree with you, but are they going to act on what you're asking them to do? Even if it's good for them. Like, people agree that they should eat more vegetables, but then they still grab the Pringles, including me. I love Pringles.
So that's still kind of the point where it's figuring out that point where you feel like, okay, we're getting dependent on what your KPIs are. They may be looking good. Like, okay, we're getting people to engage, but then they're not making the buying decision and kind of figuring out that component. So I guess it's maybe not looking too much at certain KPIs, thinking this is it, and really, okay, is it moving the needle or not?
Right. You need to get a lot of people looking at what you're doing, but then you also need them to act on what they say they agree with. And that's where it's much, much harder than I thought it was going to be honest.
So in addition to working with women-led public companies, you mentioned you also work with women founders through Portfolio, through Golden Seeds. What would you say are some of the common challenges or mindsets that you feel like hold back women founders from success, and what advice would you have to them when they're in that startup phase?
Right. So the one thing that is a fact that is that most probably it's going to take a lot longer to raise capital and a lot longer to get traction than you originally thought. So whatever you thought, how long things are going to take, it might take 2 or 3 times that amount of time. And people run out of money and circumstances change. So you end up having invested a lot and potentially maybe not having it pan. And that's really hard. So really, I think it's really important to look at what your finances are and look at what you can really afford to do without, creating negative situations elsewhere. So they think if that's one, is realize it's going to take a lot longer than you. Another thing that I think that advice that I recently took and maybe should have taken before is to build an advisory board. Right? People say you have this personal advisory board, which I've had forever. It's people that, leaders, both men and women, that I lean on for advice. But I think to make it explicit is actually really powerful, because then it forces you to convene those people at some point and to have them be vested in your success. And it forces you to talk to them periodically and get their ideas. And I think that, that's something that I think, I'm extremely happy that we formed this advisory board earlier this year. We're at, over 12 people on it now. And now, it's just adding tremendous value to our operations.
Yeah, that is an excellent idea. I've heard that from numerous people. And I don't think many people really, I think it's, again, one of those things that they're like, that sounds good. I know that would be good, but actually making it, bringing those people together and making it a formal advisory board.
And it's not a board. There's no fiduciary duty. There's often advisory boards are unpaid. It's people are doing it because they want to help and they want to be, they may have invested a small amount in your company and they want to, be close to you. And I think that I wish I had done that sooner.
So for female founders and startup leaders who are in that process of raising capital and trying to build their brand, what have you found to be helpful in connecting with audiences to help in raising capital? That just from both sides that you've been on, what have you found to be successful that maybe people overlook or they don't push hard enough into?
So my advice would be to cast a wider net. At first, we were being very intentional about who we were reaching out to be on this advisory board. The people that I knew well, people that I know liked me, etc. And then at one point I said, maybe there's people that are paying attention to what Hypatia is doing that I'm not that close to, but if I reached out to, they'd be really interested in becoming more participatory. And I would say, a quarter of our board are really people I recently met. And I would say that these people are contributing as much as anybody else is and are coming with fresh ideas because they aren't people that I knew all the time.
How are you finding and connecting with those people?
So we have an extensive email campaigns. We send out an email every week about what we're doing, about we find one email a week is about right, reminding people that we exist. And we know who's opening the emails, right? And going through 6,000 emails takes some time. So you have to be willing to invest the time. But names start popping up week after week. I'm like, oh, no, that person, but she looks really interesting. Let me send her a note, seeing if she wants to have a conversation.
Yeah, I think that boldness of just saying, what's the worst that could happen? We already know she has an interest in the company.
She unsubscribed.
Right.
Sometimes I even send emails to people that have unsubscribed. I'm like, wait a second, why did she unsubscribe? She should be really interested in this. And guess what? They often answer. It's not that they don't like Hypatia Capital. Oh, that's another thing I would say. This is like, I look at our unsubscribes every week just because I open up the email. And sometimes it's a bummer because sometimes it's somebody you're close to. And sometimes they did it by mistake. Other times they just want less email. And so don't take it personally. When you're raising capital, don't take it personally. And I, there's somebody who gave me the idea to raise capital and do an advisory board and said, I'm totally into this and I'm going to invest. And then she ghosted me. And every 6 months I reach out, you're going to join the advisory board. And she ghosts me. And you could take it personally, or you could just say, maybe she has something else going on. Maybe she has another priority. Maybe there's something that doesn't mesh with what she's doing right now. And that's okay, because the important thing is to find the people that do care about what you do.
Right. And it sounds like she still gave you some great ideas about starting the board. And
I'm grateful.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I think, remembering to take those wins. It's like you're going to have a lot of difficulties along the way, but taking those wins, and you certainly did. So, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, I was not brought up in sales, but I remember like 10, 15 years ago, I read some sales books, and you just have to be very consistent about your outreach. For an advice, the advisory board, is it the first few people? Yes, they're going to be from your inner circle. But if you want to grow, you have to go outside your inner circle. And that's another thing. Go outside your inner circle for other people. I recently met the most amazing group of women. And I think, the leader of this group she jokes about it. She's like, I think we were set up on a blind date. But I met a woman, she has an incredible network and is about, women investors. And she invited me to an offsite in a different country than I was at. And I'd literally had, lunch with her. And 5 other people were at the lunch. And I said, you know what she's done is so interesting. I'm just going to jump on a plane and go. And I have to say, it was funny. I was having some friends over who stayed at my house the weekend before. They were like, you're nuts. You get on a plane to go to another country to, you don't know who these people are. And there's one person that I thought I knew it was going to be there, but she ended up not being there. I said, you know what? Yeah, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do it. And it was amazing. And it was an incredibly enriching experience intellectually, personally, emotionally. And so invite people from outside of your network in, and be open to taking a call from people who are outside of your network. Just this morning, I had a call with a woman who I think's been on my mailing list for like 6 years. And it doesn't show up as somebody I would reach out to, but she reached out to me. She said, you know what? I invested a little bit in your company and this is what I'm doing. Can we have a call? And I said, of course. And I learned so much on that call. And so I think being really open and having time for everybody is really important.
Yeah. You never know where an idea or help is going to come from. Yeah. So given your experience, both kind of on the Wall Street side and as a founder and working with other founders, are there key trends, shifts in the marketplace that you're really paying attention to that you think it's important that people really focus on going into 2025?
Well, yes. I think that I'm invested in women. I've been doing this since 2007. But in the last year and a half, the topic of women and the economy and women and purchasing power has been nonstop. And I think that it started with Taylor Swift's Eras Tour, where the Wall Street Journal started reporting that, every time she holds a concert, she brings $1 billion to that city's economy. Right? Beyonce's tour was at the same time, didn't get as much play. But they started really seeing this when Taylor Swift started just moving economies. And it hasn't stopped since then. And I think that regardless of what happens in the election today, I'm not making a political statement. I think what we do know is that the that the female factor is becoming very important in almost all situations. I mean, I'm sure you've heard a lot or not. If you're in the wealth industry, everybody talks about the great wealth transfer, right? The women are going to go from having a third of the wealth in the United States to having two-thirds of the wealth in the United States because of the wealth transfer that's going on in the baby generation. And so I think that this trend is your friend because at least you and I are both women, right? Or I think he identifies with it. So I think that this trend is something that is going to continue to be figured out. And the question is, how does it work for the product or service that you as an entrepreneur are providing? Now, in the case of the WCO ETF, it's pretty obvious, right? Making that connection isn't tough. But the fact of the matter is that women have been making purchasing decisions for a long time. And they haven't really been pushed to think about it from a female perspective. And I think we're going to see more and more of that. And you have to be smart about it. In the wealth industry, you have every single wealth management firm from, Charles Schwab, the supermarkets, to Ellevest, which is specialty, right? Having how do we capture this great wealth transfer moment? But you also have things like FAIR, right? Which is Amy Willis Cross idea that you should be able to go into a store and, with your app, put it on the QR code or the bar of the product and have somebody tell you or let you know if you're curious whether this is a pro-female product or not, right? So is that going to be a trend? I think it is. And I think that, it's just going to be something that people are more mindful about than they were 5 years ago or 8 years ago or 9 years ago. So for, I think because of the different things that are happening in our economy, both the transfer of wealth, women have been graduating in obviously larger numbers for decades now, but I think it's now turning the tide where women are also at the college age, right at the entry level, making as much money as men. So what does that mean from the consumer's point of view? And, you've probably heard forever that women are the people that decide what kind of car you buy. And that the car salesmen don't talk to the women, they talk to the men, and the one that talks to the women are much more successful, right? But I think that's always been focused kind of on the family car, right? What about the young woman who now can afford a more expensive car? And what are the car companies going to do about that? I remember I had this crazy idea right before the economic meltdown in 2009. And I was like, I thought Tom Ford should be designing the interiors of BMW or something. It wasn't, it was something else. And I thought, why aren't the interiors of cars more fashion, female friendly? Your payment on your 3 Series BMW is less than your payment on Porsches, maybe at that age, right? So I don't know. I think I was thinking of that in 2008, and it was probably too early, right? But I think in 2028, it might make sense now,
right?
Because so I think when you're thinking about as an entrepreneur, I think you think who your target market is, but it's how is that person changing what she's thinking about how she's spending her money. Are people going to be more intentional with their money or not? Mm-hmm. And that goes back to the WCO, right? Until now, investing intentional was only available to wealthy women. You had to be an accredited investor. If you know this, if you're raising money, you're going for accredited investor money. It's people that make 200,000 or have a net worth of over $1 million. Well, what about the woman who makes 180,000? Where's her IRA? Or what's she spending on?
Yeah, I think we're definitely moving in that direction. So yeah, that is important to keep your eye on to make smart moves.
Intentionality. Is it a thing or not in the product and service that you're developing? And it might not be. I'm not saying everything has to be with intention. I'm just saying it's a trend to think about. Is that trend going to work for you, or just is it not really something you need to be focused on?
Well, it's interesting. When I was in college, I was in a marketing class and we were looking at different companies, and my group was assigned Harley Davidson. And I thought, well, that's a little intimidating. And my professor actually loved Harley Davidson. She said, no, it's a unique subculture. Just, go, because I had just gone to the website and I'm like, I'm only getting so far. She's like, no, you need to go down to the dealership. And I was really surprised. So this was, I'm dating myself a little. This was back in like 2001, 2002. And I went in there and it was like they were rolling out the red carpet, bringing me in, showing me everything, and wanted me to feel totally welcome, totally at home. And they were doing a phenomenal job of intentionally designing motorcycles that a lot of people would think, oh, Harleys, that's just a guy's thing. They were having some that they made a big deal about women's riding groups and what did women prefer, what body style, tons of merch, everything. They wanted it to be just as welcoming and a community for women as men. And that really helped them. And I thought, and that's 22 years ago. And so it is, people who pay attention to this, it doesn't have to be just in, the beauty industry or something that you think, well, of course, it can be in something where you think, okay, how can we distinguish ourselves from our competitors? It doesn't mean they're alienating men by any means. They're just both, making something that's designed that both men and women would enjoy, or different, things that take into account what do men enjoy, what do women enjoy, how can we bring people together so they can both enjoy this without feeling like, it's not really there for them. So I totally take your point. And people who get creative with how can we make this work for us, that can be a huge, help them move ahead faster. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you have any piece of, like a final piece of advice that you want to leave listeners with today?
Well, I think that one of the things that I think is really important is you hear this advice given a lot of go with your gut. What is go with your gut? This is what I feel. And I sometimes wonder if it's good advice or not. I've gone back and said, like, well, maybe you're just feeling it in your gut because you're fooling yourself or you're being delusional, etc. But what I think I've come to the conclusion is if you don't go with your gut, you will probably regret it. Like if you go with your gut, you may not succeed, but you'll feel like you fulfilled the mission that you wanted to fulfill. And if you don't, I think you'll regret it. And I think most people who are on the other side of that moment where they went to the gut with their gut, whether they were successful or whether they weren't, will always tell you, I'm glad I did it. And I think that it's scary, right, to go with your gut. But I think ultimately, I reaffirm that that's one of the most important things you can tell entrepreneurs is that that is a really, really, or not just entrepreneurs, just everybody, really, right? The opinion you need to listen to is a lot of times what your heart is telling is the way to do it.
And conviction. If you feel really convicted, like this is something that really matters, I have got to do this. Yeah, you will. You'll regret it if you don't.
I'll tell you, we have a WCO. It's been out there for over a year and a half. And we're struggling to gain assets. The ETF performs. It does, past results, no indication of future results, but we are outperforming both the S&P 600 and the Russell 2000 after fees. But for some reason, it's not getting assets. And there's a lot of reasons. We could talk about that, but that wasn't the point of the podcast. And that's where, you say, but isn't this something people would, I still feel like haven't solved the problem of conversion, because we've never talked to a man or a woman who didn't say, oh yeah, well, if the research says that women outperform, I should put some of my portfolio in that. So yeah, I think conviction is really important. And I think going with your gut and having the stamina to figure out a way to make it work is going to be necessary if you're going to be a successful entrepreneur, because except in very few cases, it'll never be easy. It'll always be super hard.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Well, thank you so much, Patricia, for coming on today. What is the best way for people to connect with you?
So I love connecting on LinkedIn, and my email's there, but definitely LinkedIn is a great place to start. So connect with me there. It's my first name, last name. And I'm definitely open to lots of different discussions, because I think that's where the growth comes from, is to be really open-minded and realizing we all have something to contribute.
Thank you so much, Patricia, and everyone. Thank you for joining us. And until next time, this is The Business That's Story Built. How are you growing your brand? Are you targeting the right people, developing the right relationships, and consistently getting the visibility and credibility that you need to grow your business? Whether you need a plan that's small or large in scale, our PR firm and consulting services can design and implement what your business needs to grow. To schedule a free call and learn how we can partner with you, email Christie@ChristieBilbrey.com. That's CHRISTIE@CHRISTIEBILBREY.com.